group also concluded that growth, allergenicity, tolerability, effectiveness and clinical role among such partial hydrolyzed formula may differ.
而且专家共识当中也解释指出，不同的水解配方，它对于这样子一个致敏性、诱导免疫性以及对过敏的预防的效果是不同的。
That brings me to conclusion.
因此，要看一下结论。
Again, breastfeeding is of course the best way to feed all infants.
一而再、再而三的强调，重要的事情说3遍，母乳喂养是最好的。
And why prevention? Well, cow's milk allergy is a health problem. It's worldwide prevalence. The prevalence increases, is associated with other allergies. It's expensive for the diagnosis and treatment. With no symptom is pathognomic, so difficult to diagnose. And it has also psychological impact, and guidelines are poorly followed.
首先，我们为什么要预防牛奶蛋白过敏？从诸多因素，无论是它发病率的增加，还是它一个社会负担的增加，还是一个诊断的困难，都使得我们要预防牛奶蛋白过敏。
Should partial hydrolysate be used as standard in formula? Another consensus paper published 2 years ago concluded that based on the available data, the use of partial hydrolyzed formula in healthy infants is safe with regard to growth.
适度水解配方能否成为标准婴儿配方？这样子一个共识，2年前发表的共识，基于目前的依据来说，我们健康足月儿在没有办法使用母乳的时候，使用适度水解配方，对其安全生长是安全的。
Multiple publications with this 100% whey protein partially hydrolyzed infant formula have documented with varying degrees of significance the benefit of reducing the risk of developing atopic dermatitis in infants with a family history of allergy versus intact cow's milk protein infant formula.
因此，关于就是这样子一个会使适度水解乳清100%蛋白的多项研究也显示，我们再三的强调了，和牛奶整蛋白配方来讲，它可以降低过敏性，就是比如说是普通婴儿或者高危婴儿的一个特异性皮炎的发生。
Also, if you look at it from another aspect, from the socioeconomic point of view, partial hydrolysates are cheaper for the family, for the insurance, for the government, because it causes less frequent health problems than formulas with intact protein.
从卫生经济学分析来讲，可以看到适度水解配方它的性价比更高。
So, what could be a new way how to position the different formulas? Breastfeeding is of course the best way to feed infants, and that breastfeeding should be exclusive. If it's partial breastfeeding, then probably breastfeeding with a partial hydrolysate should be recommended. Today, if there is no breastfeeding, we still look at family history of atopy, and there is consensus that if the family history is positive, we recommend partial hydrolysate. But I think that if the family history is negative, today there are also good arguments to use partial hydrolysate as a second choice infant feeding, and that intact protein may be recommended still, but that partial hydrolysate is certainly a worthwhile good alternative to intact protein, and probably that there are advantages of the partial hydrolysate compared to the intact protein.
可以看一下这样子一个对于牛乳蛋白过敏的一个流程图。母乳喂养是最重要的。当没有办法进行纯母乳喂养的时候，还是提倡母乳加上适度水解配方。当宝宝没有办法进行母乳喂养的时候，询问，因为基于现在的一些指南的话，我们还是要询问有没有过敏家族史，有的话还是推荐适度水解配方，这个已经是指南共识，无需质疑的。但是如果没有的话，到底是采用标准婴儿配方还是适度水解配方都可以。但是越来越多的证据显示，采用适度水解配方，它可能有相对于整蛋白牛乳蛋白整蛋白来说，它有其他就是预防过敏性疾病的一些好处，而且没有生长的不良反应。
And we as scientists may still be discussing whether partial hydrolysate has a place as starter formula or not, but the authorities already accepted the idea because both the FDA and the European Food Safety Authority accepted partial hydrolyzed protein for the use in routine infant formula for healthy infants, independent of the risk for allergy.
所以在学术上，专家们还有争议是否常规推荐适度水解配方作为普通婴儿的一个母乳的替代喂养。但是美国 FDA 和欧洲的食品安全局已经接受这样的适度水解配方作为健康婴儿的一个常规配方使用。
And some scientific associations start to follow this idea of thinking because according to the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine, they conclude that when donor human milk is not available or appropriate, protein hydrolyzed formulas may be preferable to standard infant formula.
另外一个来自于就是母乳研究的当中可以看到，2017年当捐赠母乳或者母乳不可用的时候，适度水解配方它与标准配方来说，它更适合婴儿的使用。
I would like to thank you for your attention.
谢谢大家。
谢谢 ，Thank you for your very excellent presentation. 那么我们非常感谢他，Professor Venpass 给了我们一个完整的一个报告，它主要是讲了它的部分水解蛋白的好处。那么是不是现在作为一个预防性的预防这个过敏的措施？那么从他的报告当中，包括最近的发展趋势当中，好像是有去替代我们整蛋白的配方的趋势。但是大家知道，我们的配方现在在中国啊也越来越多，但是我们一定要基于科学的判断。所以大家看到它最后几张 PPT 还是一个是部分水解，部分水解的话，partial水解的话，我们还有原料。等一会儿美章程马上就来，酪蛋白和乳清蛋白这两个，说明他们现在还没有两个都可以，对吧？然后呢，我们还有氨基酸的配方，所以这现在我们根据指南的话，大家都知道，现在整蛋白和在如果没有加速死的情况下，也没有100%说排除这个整蛋白的应用。所以这个呢是还是需要继续研究和继续观察，但是已经提供了一条思路，就是用这个部分水解对有家属史的孩子，尽管没有症状，我们是不是预防性的开始使用？这我认为是值得借鉴，而且有那么多的 evidence， 还有那么最新的指南也基本上是指向这个作用。所以大家非常好，今天我们给更新了很多的知识，所以我呢用作时间就到此结束。下面我们有请龚思堂教授主持下一阶段的美赞成的微信会。因为这个科林罗道夫是我的朋友，但是我也不能占的太多。
刚才蔡教授讲了，借这个话题，刚才这个One Plus 是讲的这个乳清蛋白水解，这是这个 Professor Rudolph 是会跟我们讲酪蛋白水解的以后的一些问题。大家知道这个Professor Rudolph 的话，他是鲁道夫尔克县的主编，因为他的父亲是编的这本书，后面是再版的时候是由他主编的。这个他现在虽然是在这个美章城工作，但是他还是一个骨科大夫，还是有做临床的工作。所以我们以热烈的掌声有请这个 Professor Rudolph，please。
Thank you. So, Professor Vandenplas just talked to you all a little bit about prevention of allergy, cow milk allergy. I will tell you, if we had a chance for a point-counterpoint, we disagree on many things. Because I personally do not believe that partially hydrolyzed whey proteins have been clearly shown to prevent allergy to cow's milk or to prevent atopic dermatitis, even in the population that's at high risk. So we'll stop there, because what I'm going to talk to you about instead is the management of children that have been diagnosed with cow milk allergy. I am not being able to forward the slides. Okay, so we'll begin by showing you something that you all know, that cow's milk allergy, food allergy in general in children is very, very common, and it's increasing in prevalence. And if you look in China, one study showed that it's increasing in China from a prevalence of about 9.9% overall to 18% over the last 10 years, and that particularly cow milk allergy now runs at a rate of somewhere around 3 to 3.5%. So unlike much of what you've heard about today, this is a diagnosis you will see in your office every day. Now we divide cow milk allergy into either IgE-mediated cow milk allergy or non-IgE-mediated, and the big difference is the rate of response. When you have an IgE-mediated response, you'll get anaphylaxis very quickly, you'll get puffy skin, and life changes very quickly for the child, and it's a health risk. But the more common form is non-IgE-mediated, and you'll get slow onset of symptoms, such as diarrhea, skin rash, atopic dermatitis. The diagnostic approach to cow's milk allergy is really quite simple, and there's various paradigms that are used. The one I like best is written by the European Society of Pediatric GI Nutrition. And basically, when you have a history that suggests it, you do an elimination diet. This can be done either with an extensive hydrolysate or with an amino acid-based formula. You take them off of whatever formula they're on for 1 to 4 weeks, depending on symptoms, and then you challenge them. The only exception to this are children that have anaphylaxis. And in these children, you can do a specific IgE and elimination and see if they have symptoms. Now, what do we do after that point? Well, you either challenge them, and if they pass the challenge with cow milk, they don't have cow milk allergy. And if they don't pass it, they do have cow milk allergy, and you keep them on an elimination diet. So the diagnosis really depends on challenge. And I strongly encourage people to formally challenge children that they diagnose with cow milk allergy, because many children are misdiagnosed and carry the diagnosis for years to months. So today I'm going to talk to you about a little different approach to cow milk allergy. First, we'll talk about the treatment, which is allergy avoidance. Then we'll talk about alleviation of symptoms. Can we get symptoms better faster? Then we'll talk about the acquisition of tolerance to cow milk again. So can you return to a normal life sooner? And finally, can we prevent the children from getting other allergies? So when you think about what formulas to use to treat cow milk allergy, the first is to know not what to use. So there's some formulas that people sometimes use that just are wrong. Lactose-free milk doesn't mean that it doesn't have cow milk in it, so don't use lactose-free milks. Using other mammalian milk, such as soy or goat, actually doesn't help because you get cross-reactivities. Soy formula is one that's used frequently in children over 6 months, but there are concerns about that I'll talk about in a minute. And in fact, some of the extensively hydrolyzed whey proteins have been shown to have problems in children with cow milk allergy because they're not hydrolyzed enough. Now, specifically in terms of soy, it can get a cross-reactivity to children become soy allergic that were milk allergic in about 17 to 47% of cases. And in addition, soy isn't a great formula, particularly for young girls, because more and more the data is now becoming clear that the phytoestrogens in soy actually probably do cause some long-term effects. So I avoid soy whenever I can. And finally, then, what should we use? And there's two choices. One is extensively hydrolyzed formula, which are tolerated actually in greater than 90% of children with cow milk allergy. And in fact, for some of the extensively hydrolyzed formulas, they've been now shown to be tolerated in 99% of children that have cow milk allergy. Or you can use an amino acid-based formula. And I will explain to you why I don't like amino acid-based formulas as this lecture goes on. You just saw this slide. What do we mean by hydrolysis? You take a whole milk protein, we treat them with enzymes. They can become partially hydrolyzed, so they have long chains of peptides in them. These are not hypoallergenic. You can extensively hydrolyze them, which means they sit in the vat longer, and you break them down into small peptides that are not longer than 8 to 10 amino acids. Or you could just start with amino acids. And then we add a bunch of vitamins, amino acids, the carbohydrates, the lipids, and you end up with a formula. The allergenicity decreases as you go along the path, so that the amino acids are the least allergenic, and the extensively hydrolyzed a little less so. And this slide just shows you what routine infant formula would look like in terms of the number of children that would get that are cow milk allergic that would have a positive test when tested with these formulas. Routine infant formula, obviously 15 and 15. Partially hydrolyzed formula, about half of children will react to a partialized hydrolyzed formula when they have cow milk allergy. The whey casein is about 5, extensively hydrolyzed whey about 1, and extensively hydrolyzed casein actually turns out to have far fewer reactions. And the reason is because just from a production point of view, casein is easier to hydrolyze. Now what's important is, I think Dr. Vandenklas pointed out that not all hydrolysates are the same. And this is a new concept, but it's very important to understand. If you look at different hydrolysates, this just shows you a plot of the different peptides and where they sit. But if you look at it, these are different families, so that even 2 casein hydrolysates differ in their peptide structure. And as we begun to understand some of the things that make one develop tolerance to cow milk or long-term prevention of allergy, it's become evident that some of those peptides are very important in the bioactivity of the particular hydrolysate. And this shows you that there are differences in allergenicity among the different hydrolysates. And here you can see that of all a group of partially hydrolyzed and extensively hydrolyzed formulas, only 2 of them didn't lead to reactions in children with cow milk allergy. So if you look at all the different products out there, you have to be selective in what you pick, because depending on the manufacturing methods, you'll get differences in both the bioactivity of the hydrolysate in terms of promoting tolerance, as well as in its hypoallergenicity. So, what do you want to use? Well, one, I mentioned there are real differences in the hydrolysates, the different extensively hydrolyzed formula, and the allergenicity and efficacy of various extensively hydrolyzed whey or extensively hydrolyzed casein formula vary. So why not just use an amino acid formula? And I'm going to come back to that later. There's good reasons not to use an amino acid-based formula. So what about alleviation of acute symptoms? Does it matter which hydrolysate I use? Or am I going to get better relief if I use an amino acid-based formula? And I'm going to turn quickly to remind you all something that we talked about this morning for those of you that were here. Children with allergy have a different gut microflora. And this has been known for a long time. There's some interaction around the microflora, but if you look at the children with allergy shown in red, they have a different composition of their gut microflora than normal infants. So that tells us something, so maybe we can fix it. And one of the first fixes to this that was looked at was the use of Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG. The reason it was introduced was actually because it had been shown to be a very effective probiotic in terms of its binding in intestinal cells. And also, it seemed to have an effect on a lot of infections and would decrease infection when it was given to humans. This was work done in Finland about 30 years ago by Erika Isolari, and over time it became recognized that this was a very effective probiotic. It's a probiotic that's been studied more than any other probiotic ever. So it was introduced into an extensively hydrolyzed formula, extensively hydrolyzed casein formula, and infants were given it that had cow milk allergy. Either they used the formula with just the extensively hydrolyzed casein or with LGG. And what they looked at is how long it took those infants to get better in terms of their atopic dermatitis and cow milk allergy. You can see the severity at 1 month, reduced a little here, but when you added the LGG, it was a better formula than just casein hydrolysate alone. And in fact, when you looked at the children that had colitis, that had some blood in their stool from the cow milk allergy, you saw the same thing. We saw that these are the kids a month later, they got just the extensively hydrolyzed casein formula. They still had some blood in their stool, but those that got the extensively hydrolyzed formula with LGG had no blood in their stool. Why? Because their mucosa was healing more rapidly. And again, looking at fecal calprotectin, you can see that the fecal calprotectin levels were lower in the group that got the LGG added to the extensively hydrolyzed casein formula. So with this combination of the extensively hydrolyzed casein formula and LGG, you got better, but you also got better faster. And that was due to the LGG effect on the mucosal lining. It helped to heal the mucosa. So what next do we need to think about? Well, in an ideal world, I wouldn't just get a child better.